time today and look them up and see what Suneet is doing. I just have to say this, in case you didn't hear me before. In 2012, Forbes magazine named Suneet among the top 15 in the world of classroom revolutionaries. So this is a very interesting subject here. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming and listening to these discussions. The comment was it's crowded next door, and I think it's partly because there's a perception that these are obligations. To do good is something we should allocate for Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and noon. I hope listening to our story, you'll agree at the end of it that this is, at least for us, it's about opportunity. It's not about obligation. We just realized that there's a market that is unaddressed, that there's a market that has very little real competition and has probably the largest opportunity that ever was. 2.5 billion people use the internet, 4.5 billion don't. I remember about 10 or 12 years ago, most of the Indian wireless operators were about to go bankrupt. They bought a bunch of spectrum because they saw cell phone penetration take off in the West and in other parts of the world. And they said, well, it's going to happen here. They paid a lot for the spectrum. And the initial win was tough. In 2003, 2004, they were only at 50 million subscribers. And people would say, well, there isn't a market. This part of the world, it took them 100 years to put in 30 million landlines. Who's going to teach these folks how to use mobile phones? There's no market in this part of the world for mobile phones. And people didn't perceive that opportunity. The same thing exists today with the internet. There's a whole world out there where people don't think that 4.5 billion person gap will get eliminated. And I assure you that it will get eliminated. It won't take 10 or 15 years to do it. I see it happening in 5 years or less. The number of internet users will double and triple in the next, or at least the number of internet subscribers will double and triple in this little period of time. The number of wireless subscriptions is now very close to the world's population. The number of users are less than that, but the number of subscriptions are up there. And internet subscriptions are significantly lower, and internet users are significantly lower. When you think of the reason for that, there are primarily two big reasons. One is, of course, infrastructure. The landline infrastructure, the broadband infrastructure doesn't exist in that environment. The second is cost. And I'll talk about both of those but before I do, I want to talk a little bit about the impact of the internet. It is amazing how much it's become part of our lives here, but we still don't truly acknowledge how powerful this is. It is, I think, probably the most profound, powerful thing that humanity's ever created, ever. How it empowers people is just so significant. We certainly had heard about the power of Facebook during the Egyptian revolution a few years ago, how people connected with each other and were able to help overthrow a dictator. But we're going to hear in the next few weeks about the largest IPO ever when Alibaba.com goes public. And Alibaba.com generates $170 billion worth of commerce for micromanufacturing in China. It's not the genius of the Communist Party that's allowed China to grow in the manner that China's grown. It is the fact that micromanufacturers, 5 little guys in $100,000 worth of annual business in the middle of nowhere in China now on the internet, or have been for the last 70 years or more. But that advantage isn't available to the millions of micromanufacturers in India and Africa and Afghanistan and many other parts of the world. We're working with NGOs, one in Afghanistan that works in a place called Turquoise Mountain. It takes these artisans that make this jewelry from this place and allows them to shave about $400 per item in middleman fees by taking the product using e-commerce directly to the mass retailers or directly to the consumer. And that $400 isn't a 2x or a 3x improvement, it's a 20x improvement in what they make. They sell these pieces at $20 to some local guy, figures out how to get it to some big city, and then the next level, and the next level, and the next level, and somehow ends up at Macy's in the US or Barney's or some other place. And at Barney's or Macy's, it's a $600 or $800 piece of jewelry. The power of commerce, the power of the internet and commerce is significant, and I won't take up a lot of your time talking about that, but I'll talk a little bit more about the power of the internet and education. This has been a big focus for us. And to understand that, I'm going to use India as the example, but it's not just India, this applies to many, many other parts of the world. The government in India will tell you that India has 220 million students. Studies show you that grades 5 to 8, 43% of them drop out. Out of those that enter grade 9, 2/3 of them won't graduate high school. 68% dropout rates of those that enter grade 9. When you extrapolate that, the total number of kids that should be in school is 360 million. So potentially 140 million kids, 140 million kids are not in school. I mean, this is generations that are going to be lost, that won't learn how to read and write, and will not create any economic value. This is not about wanting to do good, this is about an opportunity. India talks about this demographic advantage. If you talk to senior politicians in India, there's this lax attitude about the future is ours just because everybody's young. The US is getting old, and Europe's getting old, and we've got this great young population. But if you don't educate them and they can't bring value to the economy, then having a young population doesn't do anything. In fact, 6-7 months ago, The Economist wrote a front-page article called "The Angry Young Indian," because they're not getting the skills they need to contribute and earn. They're entering the workforce, and there's high levels of unemployment. And this perception that that can't go wrong is naive. It's a time bomb ready. So what's the solution? One of the problems with the quality of education in India is that 2/3 of India, 70% of India lives in the rural environment. And that chart shows math scores that a study did when they gave that same math test in Delhi, they went out. So when they were in Delhi, the averages were around 60 something. When they went out to 100 kilometers or so, went down to the 50s. By the time they got about 250 kilometers out, the averages were 14 and 15% on that same math, on that same exam. And the reason is the best quality teachers don't end up in rural India. And this is just not India. I live in Canada, I've grown up in Canada. I assure you that we have the same kind of problems in rural Canada. We have the same kind of issues in the native communities way up north. The best quality teachers end up in the big cities, they don't end up in those places. And we think the solution to that is the internet, because the internet allows access to a level of resources that even the best teachers can't provide. And this is not an attempt to replace teachers. This is an attempt to empower both teachers and students with content and access that is truly infinite. My oldest child, my son, just started university this week, and a few months ago I asked him, I said, so who's your best teacher this year? And this is again not intended to cast aspersions on the quality of teachers. And he said, they're all sort of good, but I think the best one was YouTube. Because when I couldn't understand something, couldn't figure out how to balance chemical equations, I went to YouTube and I typed in how to balance chemical equations, and a bunch of videos came up. And not every one of those explained it the way I understood, but I would watch 4 or 5 of these 5 or 6 minute videos, and one of them would just explain exactly the way that I need to understand. So it's not, the perfect way of teaching for every child. It is all those variations that the internet brings in. And this not just applies well in India. You think of the situation of Afghanistan. I don't know how many of you've heard of the case of Malala Yousafzai, the young lady who was taken off the bus and shot in the head because she refused the Taliban's directive that girls not go to school. So there are NGOs in Afghanistan that try to create a home teaching environment where mothers can help. Mothers who may have never stepped into a classroom can still help educate their daughters because they have access to the internet. So the power of the internet, we think, is substantial, and we think it really should be a fundamental human right. And beyond that, I won't spend time on trying to pitch the internet to you. I assume that if you're sitting in this room, you agree that being connected is good. So there are two reasons why 2/3 of the world has never been on the internet. The first one is affordability. We tried to look at what was the inflection point in the US. What was the point when PC penetration really took off? We tried to look at what was the inflection point in India when cell phone penetration really took off. And one of the things we discovered is that in most of these markets, these products took off and the cost dropped below about a week of salary. Hardware in the US sometime in 98 or 99 dropped below $1,000, and you started to get a significant increase. The internet came on, you had the internet bubble, and everything else that's happened after. Now, to get to a week of salary in India, where for a billion people or so out of the 1.2 billion, the 200 million do much better off than the remaining billion. A week of salary is about 35 bucks. So can you create a good enough computing device for 35 bucks and deliver the internet in that environment? Because if it's not 35, if it's even 200, you don't get penetration. At 100, you don't get penetration. And to get to their then being able to afford 100 bucks, India would have to grow at 10% a year for the next 18 years. We've lost another generation. And it's not going to take that long. We think it's going to happen a lot faster. And it's going to get, and you're going to see a much greater degrees of penetration. So one aspect is affordability. The second is the networks. We've had 3G here for a good 7 or 8 years, and 4G in the last couple of years, and there's discussion about 5G and the next ones and so on. India also auctioned off 3G spectrum back in about 2007 or 2008. Except, despite the operators spending the money on the spectrum, we're now 7 years later, and out of the 450,000 mobile towers that cover that country, only about 20% of those mobile towers provide 3G connectivity. 80,000 mobile towers out of 450,000 provide any level of 3G connectivity. The rest of it doesn't. On 2.5G networks, a CNN page on average takes 2 to 3 minutes. So devices cost hundreds of dollars, multiples of months of salary for the target consumer, and web pages take 3 minutes to download. And these are the key barriers, and this is what we're focused on trying to solve. We now make and sell devices in that price point. In fact, even in the US, the entry-level device is available at $37.99. I'll pass this one around. And you'll get a sense of how it functions. Certainly, Google and their magic helped this happen because they spent a lot of money and time around an OS and created a developer community around it and made the OS in essence free. What also helped was that after the 2008 financial crisis, our suppliers of touchscreens and LCDs went bust. And none of the big suppliers wanted to supply to us because Apple and Samsung were just such huge suppliers that if all you needed was 100,000 or 50,000 a year, nobody wanted to supply. So with some effort and some luck, we decided we were successful in making our own touchscreens. Even today, a multi-touch projected capacitive touchscreen, million unit quantity out of China, is around $7. Our manufacturing cost is sub 2. And that's not to say that we make it less expensive than the Chinese. I'm sure it costs them less than $2 to make it. There's still a supply-demand mismatch out there. And making the touchscreens and developing key technology around the LCDs helped us reduce costs. But what we also did was we sort of looked at a different kind of business model because we saw what the most innovative companies out there were doing. Apple wasn't just making money on hardware, they were making money on their app store. And they were making money on advertising. And Google was spending billions of dollars on an operating system, not hoping to make anything from that operating system. And Amazon had just launched the Kindle Fire, selling it for below the manufacturing cost. So we realized that there were ways that you could separate the user and the payer of the device. You could shift the burden of margins from hardware to something else. So we make some money on hardware and device warranties. We actually don't lose money yet. Although my hope is that by next summer, we'd be in a position to lose a little bit on hardware. This is right now $37.99, and my target is to get to below 20. I'd like this to be a $19.99 solution by next summer. And even if my manufacturing cost is a little higher than that, I think the recurring residuals can be such that I can afford to lose a little bit more than that. But we make money on network services, we make money on content and apps, and we make money on advertising. So the business models of hardware start to change. We developed a technology on which we received now 18 US patents that helps deal with the network issues in that environment. If you think of the average web page, the CNN page is an example, 2/3 or 70–75% of the content of that web page is not what you see on the screen. It's not the pictures and the text that you finally end up seeing on the screen. It is everything else behind that. The instruction set, the HTML coding, the JavaScript, the CSS, the cookies, the link information, all of that kind of stuff makes up 70–75% of the page. In a mobile environment where the network's congested and we've got very small pipes in this part of the world, we forced it down to a client device which already has a limited amount of processing power, and then we try to get it to render up that page. We're able to take that meg-and-a-half page, reduce it down to 30 kilobytes, but keep the look, feel, functionality of the page exactly the same by pre-processing that 75% of the content and running that in proxy server in parallel. The benefit of that, and I apologize if that got confusing, but the benefit of this is that in India currently, my average internet user on my, that uses it, using my solution in my devices, for 30 hours of usage, on average, consumes about 20 megabytes, and that costs me 4 cents. So think of what you pay for your data plans today, here, and imagine if the cost of that monthly internet was now 4 cents. The dynamics changes. So you had a... is that your patents? So we have 18 US patents on how we deliver this and get this.
That seems to be horrible.
That is, but what we discovered is that you can't just do that. If you do that, you say, you know, download it on your $400 device, the $400 customer may or may not be happy with that experience, may not be in a 2.5G network. So you've got to not only do that, you've got to get the devices to the right price point for this to happen. So we felt very strongly that you needed to deliver a complete solution to the consumer.
I mean, I'm sure you can't talk about details, but are you investing in hardware too and infrastructure?
We don't invest in infrastructure. with regards to hardware, we actually make and sell hardware. So the only infrastructure that we have is we use back-end proxy servers, but the cost of that is negligible. You know, there are rental server farms out there where you can get tens of thousands of servers up relatively fast for a very, very low cost. We use an IBM facility in upstate New York that runs all our servers in a facility in London. So all our all our traffic from anywhere in the world goes through both of these farms, and that's it. But we realize that hardware is the customer acquisition tool. That we need to be able to get that customer acquisition tool to be able to generate the other, to be able to deliver our internet services, to be able to generate the other revenue streams. If we don't do that piece of hardware, then the rest of them become irrelevant. And you can see that with many. Look at every successful significant business out there. Apple is the prime example. The largest market cap in history is because hardware is the customer acquisition tool, but they make a significant amount of money on everything else that happens after. So we've not only reduced the bandwidth consumption, but the amount of processing power and memory I need for the client side also gets less because I pre-process the page on the backend server. That way, that means that I can get away with devices that have a lot less processing power, much lower cost devices.
Are they having to access it through a particular browser or something in order to do that?
Exactly.
An
So
alternative
on our
browser?
devices, we actually leave the stock Android browser on there, and we add in our browser.
Okay.
And the proposition to the consumer is, here's free access. So you buy this device, at whatever price, 40, 50 bucks, or whichever version model you decide to purchase, and internet access is included within the cost of that product on that browser.
Right.
Now there's some restrictions. Audio video streaming is not part of the free.
Audio streaming, you said?
Audio and video streaming is not part of the free, so our
Okay.
solution doesn't have a significant impact on that. And when you need audio and video streaming, find yourself a Wi-Fi hotspot or buy yourself a data plan, you can. But even without that, email and Wikipedia and Facebook and a significant portion of the internet is still available to you. But it is the same network, the same economics without any upgrade or modifications on the network at all. After spending billions of dollars on buying spectrum, why haven't the Indian operators, and not just India, this is in Nigeria, this is in parts of the Caribbean, this is in Latin America. Hey, it's in parts of the US where you still don't have coverage. 65, 70 million Americans still don't use the internet for a whole variety of reasons, but there's still small parts of the US that don't have 3G and 4G coverage because the operators find it too expensive to go out there. But you can deliver the internet on those networks right now with no modifications on those networks. Sorry, somebody had a question.
So, how do with internet.org, which is kind of the ballpark approach that Facebook will use, what's your relationship, if any, with what they're trying to do, and how are they working with your browser with a walled garden plus versus their version, which is kind of walled garden specifically?
So, initial discussions, nothing's been finalized in any manner, and once something gets finalized, you'll see an announcement out there. But at the end of the day, we're trying to achieve the same thing. They believe, and we believe, that everybody should have internet access. They've got resources, they haven't figured out how to do it. We don't have the same scale of resources, but we think we've figured out how to do it, and the last couple of years of how we've grown shows that. I don't know that the big companies get it yet, including Facebook, and you just see it in their actions.
Recent
I'm not
updates.
sure WhatsApp was the right decision for Facebook, and they could justify $42.50 $43 per user for a messaging app. But remember, this thing that I sell for 38 and manufacture for around 28 is $15 less that not only allows them to monetize messaging, but also email and browsing and search and everything else. So they could have handed out 500 million of these devices with connectivity to the internet for $15 a piece less than what they paid for WhatsApp. So there are solutions out there. I don't believe that the large companies yet get it. And you know, this is, if you read Peyton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, this is typically exactly that. This is why this room has, you know, a few dozen people and not 5,000 people, because there's this perception that, well, that's obligation and it's not opportunity. The reality is that's opportunity. Right? And we know that it's opportunity. So Peyton Christensen talked about the disruption of the good enough. There's this perception of, well, hey, if you can make something for 28 bucks, how good can it be? And it can't be that great when it's that low in cost. The reality is that the difference in performance continues to the difference reduce in a significant way. The product we provide the Indian government will just chart that out of how that's sort of evolved over the last 2.5 years. That the blue lines mark the performance expectations of both high-end and the low-end market. And when the first iPad came out, it was a Cortex-A 1-week processor with 256 megabytes of RAM. And the first version of the product we supplied to the Indian government was 366 megahertz, 256 megabytes of RAM. The next version got to a Cortex-A 1-week processor and 512 RAM. And we would go out and say, hey, if we could give you the same caliber processor as the iPad and double the RAM and a user experience that is good enough, you know, is there a market for it? As we saw that there was a market for it. The iPad went on to a dual-core processor, 512, and then a dual-core processor, 8 gig. And that's the kind of range that they hover around. And the product that I've just passed around with a 1.3 gig dual-core processor, 512 megabytes of RAM. We're supplying to the Indian government with a gig of RAM, but it costs less to manufacture today than the CPU cost Apple when they launched the iPad. Is it good enough? We think for most applications and most customers, it is good enough, and certainly we will see significant demand because of that. When we entered the Indian market at the end of 2011, the total market was only 250,000 units. And nobody expected big increases because it said, people are not going to buy these things. They're going to either buy a computer or they're going to buy a smartphone. And this thing in the middle doesn't make sense. Tablets are media devices, but we wanted to position them as internet solutions. And we helped grow that market from 250,000 units to 3 million units. And since about the start of 2013, we've been either the largest or second largest supplier of tablets in India. We outsell Apple by a factor of 2. We're neck and neck with Samsung, not because we compete for that same customer. If you can afford the Samsung device, 99 times out of 100, you're buying the Samsung device. But the target customer we're going after can't afford that device, just can't get to that same level. And that target customer is over 1 billion people in India and 4.5 billion people around the world. And it's not just India. We found that this applies around the world. We found great demand in Mexico. We found great demand in a whole different number of African countries. I like Afghanistan for a reason because it's the place that we can afford. We think we can afford to ignore, but it's a dangerous place if we let it go down the hole. As we started to get coverage, press coverage and attention and so on, we started getting U.S. school boards and people in the U.S. and NGOs in the U.S. saying, hey, by the way, in our school board, half the kids don't have broadband at home. LASD launched $1 billion iPad program, and then Compton turned around and said, by the way, we can't, for one iPad per school, forget per student. We have these extremes even in the US. And because of that, we decided to make the product available even in this market. We get a lot of coverage. And we're not doing, when you think about it, anything too special. This is just trying to make it affordable. Just deliver the internet. And we seem to take credit for all the benefit that internet delivers just because of that. I didn't know that the UN does product launches, but Ban Ki-moon, in front of 150 ambassadors, actually launched our product at the United Nations because they got so excited about inexpensive little tablet. Thank you for being here and listening to our story.
This is probably the wrong forum to ask this question because this is all about doing good things and bringing it back to money. But with that type of distribution, even though you're hitting, from a demographic standpoint, the people who are least able to, it's not like Lexus is going to say, let me advertise there. But I have to believe that there are business model elements of this from an advertising or an outreach standpoint factor in. What has been your experience with that?
So there's a big effort to get to that demographic. In India, while overall growth has gone down from 8-9% to 4 or 5%, the growth in that demographic has actually continued to go up. Our focus isn't yet on the true bottom line. When we look at this first slide that talked about wireless subscribers, it's sort of misleading because they're not 6.5 billion people that use mobile phones. Actually, it's only about 5 billion or 4.5 billion that use mobile phones. So in India, there are 19 million subscriptions, but only about 700 million users. Now, that's 1.2 billion people. That means there's 500 million people that are still not using mobile phones. So there's a segment that we're not truly positioned for. What we said was, if I just look at the number of internet subscribers in India, there are 13 million broadband connections. Maybe 100 million people at best use the internet. Between that and the 500 million, there's still 400 million people left in there. Can I not get that customer base? Same thing in Africa. And what we found is that both advertisers want to get to that customer base. That customer base is getting very savvy, very fast, and they're adopting to e-commerce and other things and mobile commerce because this is the only way. They're getting access to things that they just had no other access to before. We haven't publicly, there's some information I can't give because we went public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, raised some capital at the start of July, and we haven't put out what our advertising figures are yet, but they are sufficient to cover data costs by many multiples. So I think that I'm very confident, and this is why I say that I hope that I can actually lose money on the hardware by next summer, because I think those recurring residuals will be significant.
Will eventually, as Americans develop the technology, because I went to an digital health talk, and then someone was talking about diabetes and how they can use wearables to detect diabetes, and then health savings, cost savings. Well, the people in the U.S., especially who have diabetes, they're not the ones that are going to have the wearables. So to have to provide the cost savings for early detection. So this is kind of loops it in where you have to build infrastructure for them, bring the technology to them in order to get these indirect cost savings. Thank you very much.
For us, because the infrastructure exists, right, it's about, one, finding why this should happen, right? And that's either education or commerce. If I can show you a way to make money, you'll figure out how to use it. Second is, if you think it'll improve the living standards of the life of your kids, you'll make an effort for it, right? So So these are the two motivators, and we focus on these two motivators. And it is surprising how easy it is. Until about 2 months ago, for the first 1 million or so units that we put out there, we had not spent a single penny on advertising. I would just go around doing talks, guys like Larry would invite me, and we would get sales in that environment. And we started selling, a respectable quantity of product in the U.S. by doing nothing, but just doing a little bit of PR and making it a little online.
To follow on that, Facebook made the biggest acquisition at Mobile World Congress, 19 billion, right, for WhatsApp. Yet it's 450 million subscribers paying $1 a year.
After the first year.
After
the first year.
Exactly.
Nothing for the first year.
Nothing for the first year. So that justified 19 billion. Well, and they're also active in internet.org. Well, they see a value in trying to address those billions that are unaddressable right now. So there is a market there.
So, one of the groundwork right now is being Google and Facebook to figure out, every one of us here in this room is worth $7 to $8 a person. And there is a value to every person that they can get on. It may be 10 cents, it may be 15 cents, but there's a value that they have somewhere in Facebook's corporate headquarters, every person on the planet. It's not that they're not altruistic, but they're also for-profit companies.
Exactly.
And they're trying to figure out how to both connect people, which is a great thing to do for the planet, while also monetizing those people going forward. And by the way, when you connect people, if their value to the value to the advertiser is 15 cents, when you get them healthier and you get them more educated and you get them better jobs and you get them into the marketplace, that value only increases. So it's a really smart investment now it's going to pay off in dividends going forward.
And this is why I'm most bullish in companies like Facebook and Google, because they have less legacy barriers. And Apple has significant legacy barriers. Samsung has significant legacy barriers. Does Apple want to put out $40 devices? No matter how much time they can spend convincing you that the $500 version is the one you should buy, the moment they buy the $40 version, they create the $40 versions, guess what? Their revenue will shrink by that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you
Very much.